Blog Talk Radio.
News July 7, 2014. Fracking causing 2,000-plus earthquakes in Oklahoma and Ohio. www.occupyculturism.com. Suzanne Pissel. The small town of Jones, Oklahoma is the center of a new study published by researchers from Cornell University, CU, showing that recent surges on earthquake activity are correlated directly with hydraulic fracturing, fracking. The 40% higher incidence in earthquakes in Oklahoma since 2009 have been found to have origination with 4 injection wells that have been filled with chemical-laden water used in the process of fracking. Earthquakes were recorded to have occurred a mere 22 miles from those injection wells. The town of Jones has experienced a shocking 2,500 earthquakes of 3.0 on the Richter scale since 2008, and this phenomenon can be traced to having been caused by the increase in wastewater from injection wells due to fracking. Katie Kernan, lead author of the study, said, "It is possible that pressure looks to have risen in the places where the earthquakes are occurring. It appears to geologists that injection wells concentrate so much chemical-laced water into the Earth's crust that there is an obvious increase in subterranean pressure near these underground faults, which is causing the recent rise in earthquakes." Back in 2012, a study published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences stated that the current method of carbon capture by storing the greenhouse gas underground used by fracking is directly causational to earthquakes. Mark Zobacka and Stephen Garlick, professors in the Departments of Geophysics and Environmental Earth System Science at Stanford University, surmise that earthquakes will be triggered by injection of large volumes of CO2 and calls large-scale carbon capture and storage, CCS, a risky and likely unsuccessful strategy for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Earlier this year, geologists and scientists in Ohio discovered probable cause to believe that those sudden mild earthquakes, SME, experienced in the region of latent fracking are correlated. In Youngstown, Ohio, over 100 earthquakes rocked the town in areas that had 177 active injection wells. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources, ODNR, stated, "We believe the sand and water injected into the well during the hydraulic fracturing process may have increased pressure on an unknown microfault in the area." The Department of the Interior stated that the area known as the Marcellus Shale, which stretches from Ohio to West Virginia and into Pennsylvania and New York, has also been linked to SMES. Researchers at CU published a different study showing that contained within the fluid used for fracking are colloids, charged particles that are larger than molecules, which are present within the flowback fluid used during fracking. These particles bind to sand grains and then is released into the groundwater where municipalities obtain their public water supplies. This solution is associated with pollutants and heavy metals. The researchers state when spilled or deliberately applied to land, waste fluids from fracking are likely picking up tiny particles in the soil that attract heavy metals and other chemicals with possible health implications for people and animals. Last year, researchers at the University of Missouri, School of Medicine found that fracking is causing the contamination of human bodies with 12 chemicals, including endocrine-disrupting chemicals, EDCs, that mimic testosterone and estrogen. In another study released by CU, it was shown that newer and unconventional wells leak far more often than older and traditional ones, which could mean all across the nation methane is leaking into the environment due to fracking. Since 2009, the leak rate was measured at 2%, and unconventional wells leak at 6%, with the height of leaking being 10% coming from horizontally drilled wells in the northeastern area of Pennsylvania. Why we must protect Internet freedom from the UN, Government Corp. Suzanne Pissel. The Pew Research Center, PRC, has released a report regarding the threats to Internet freedoms and liberty online due to nation-state crackdowns, surveillance, and pressures of commercialization of the Internet. The PRC predicts that by 2025 sharing content on the Internet will be difficult because of fragmented networks. The report reads, "The majority of respondents to this 2014 Future of the Internet canvassing say they hope that by 2025 there will not be significant changes for the worse and hindrances to the ways in which people get and share content online today." And they said they expect that technology innovation will continue to afford more new opportunities for people to connect. More than 1,400 participants were asked, by 2025 will there be significant changes for the worse and hindrances to the ways in which people get and share content online compared with the way globally networked people can operate online today? 65% said no, while 35% answered yes. PRC states that industry experts are concerned about actions by nation-states to maintain security and political control will lead to more blocking, filtering, segmentation, and balkanization of the Internet. Trust will evaporate in the wake of revelations about government and corporate surveillance, and likely greater surveillance in the future. Commercial pressures affecting everything from Internet architecture to the flow of information will endanger the open structure of online life. Efforts to fix the too much information problem might overcompensate and actually thwart content sharing. Paul Sappho, Managing Director of Discern Analytics, DA, and Associate Professor at Stanford University, SU, commented that a global Internet will continue and create new uncertainties. Governments will become more skilled at blocking access to unwelcome sites. It is observed by industry experts that governments are blocking Internet Service Provider (ISP) of websites that are designated terrorist or otherwise dangerous. In 2013, to control content online, the Center for Copyright Information launched the Six Strikes Copyright Alert System (CAS) that has major participants such as AT&T, Cablevision, Comcast, Time Warner and Verizon. Internet service providers (ISPs) will collaborate to monitor the Internet for users who download copyrighted material from websites such as BitTorrent. Once a user is identified, the ISP will send a warning. There is a 3-tier system of warnings with 2 per tier. After 6 warnings, the user is blocked. Categorizing the first 2 warnings as educational alters, the user will be informed that their online activity was logged. Next comes the acknowledgement alerts that will take over the user's browser. A message will be displayed that outlines the user was caught, wherein the user must acknowledge that they have received this warning. Finally, the last 2 warnings are called mitigation measures, because the ISP will withhold bandwidth from the user and/or block access to certain websites. The ISP cannot disable the Internet completely. However, the user's ability to freely choose to go to any website will be severely impaired. Journalist Robert McDowell spoke about the egregious countries who belong to the EU and the restraint of freedom that will surely follow if the UN is allowed to govern the Internet. McDowell wrote, "Let's face it, strong-arm regimes are threatened by popular outcries for political freedom that are empowered by unfettered Internet connectivity. They have formed impressive coalitions, and their efforts have progressed significantly. In 2012, President Obama signed a secret policy directive that gives the military complete control over the Internet should the United States come under a cyber attack. Being called Presidential Policy Directive 20, PD-20, the document outlines how specific federal agencies will be empowered by the Obama administration to intercept online breaches of security, including hacking and other digital attacks. This document assures that the United States government is taking the offensive and proactive approach to digital security, where network defense is recognized as special operations designed to ensure defensive national security. Whether it means shutting down main servers or local computers that have been identified as targets, A complete shutdown of Internet access, although it requires cybersecurity legislation, would not be out of the realm of possibility. The military's role in cybersecurity with regard to digital attacks will be to ensure the United States' digital information, data, and privacy be protected. This new responsibility would be worked in conjunction with law enforcement network defenses that are being used to paramilitarizing the web using cyber units. Fred Upton, member of the Commerce, Manufacturing and Trade Subcommittee, CMTS, said, "The Internet has become this economic and social juggernaut not because governmental actors willed it to be so, but because the government took a step back and let the private sector drive its evolution. International regulatory intrusion into the Internet would have disastrous results not just for the United States, but for people around the world." According to the UN International Telecommunications Union, because the Internet is a global entity, that the UN should have jurisdiction over it, manage its abilities according to global UN standards, and engage restrictions that could be installed at the fundamental level of the Internet to prevent any infractions of international mandates. The UN wants to include the domain name system along with the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN, which is currently a privately owned United States nonprofit corporation. Break up protests by citizens. Breitbart News reports today the feds will use the threat of violence to break up protests by citizens in Merida, California. A resident told Breitbart it's going to get ugly on Monday when the feds plan to deliver another load of illegals. People in the Southern California city successfully blocked Homeland Security buses last week. The feds are pissed that they haven't been able to use this facility, Temecula, California resident Jeremy Oliver told Kristen Tate of Breitbart. Officers out there warned people that federal agents will be in Merida on Monday. They are going to get the next bus through no matter what. Riot gear and shields will be used to push the crowd back. We are being told that federal marshals or ICE will be here in the next few days and that they are bringing riot gear, Merida resident John Henry said. They're apparently going to be blocking off the street with concrete blockades so that no vehicles can get through. The River County Sheriff's Department showed up last night and brought a huge watchtower that shoots up into the air 35 feet. The government rerouted the buses to San Diego when the protesters blocked access last week. The feds claim the demonstrators pose a threat to the illegals. The Department of Homeland Security said that because of security concerns, it will not publicize immigrant transfers among Border Patrol, CBS News reported on Saturday. ISIS, give over girls for sex jihad http://www.wnd.com. Radical Islamists murdering and imposing mayhem across Iraq, now calling themselves Islamic State but generally known as ISIS, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, have demanded both property and human lives as the price of their rapid advances. Now they want girls. ISIS has been putting up posters throughout Mosul, one of the captured Iraqi cities, telling residents to bring their unmarried daughters to ISIS soldiers, according to a report from the Clarion Project, a respected non-profit organization that works to expose Islamic extremism, primarily through documentary films it produces. Citing Arabic sources including those inside Mosul, the report said the posters call for girls to participate in Jihad al-nikah, or sex jihad. The Clarion Project cites information from Al-Masryalyoum, a respected Egyptian daily newspapers along with other Arab press sources. Posters in public places in Mosul read, "We call upon the people of this county to bring their unmarried girls so they can fulfill their duty in sex jihad for their warrior brothers in the city, and anyone who will not appear will feel the full force of the Sharia, Islamic law, upon him." The report said ISIS fighters have been going door to door, entering houses, killing the men and raping women, too. 4 such victims committed suicide, the report said. Citing information from Rupert Colville, a spokesman in Geneva for Navy Pillay, a United Nations human rights official. Clarion said, Al-Iraqi, a TV station, published a report about the story of 2 Iraqi girls who were raped by the armed men of ISIS in Mosul. The 2 girls, who were sisters, said that ISIS fighters came into their house, killed the men, and afterwards, they took turns raping the women. They came into the house. They were disgusting. They were armed and spoke among themselves in a language we did not recognize. We were afraid. I tried to save my sister, but one of them hit me with his weapon, on my body and then on my face, me and my sister. I blacked out and woke up to the sounds of the screaming of my neighbor while one of the jihadists was playing with my hair, the girl said, according to the report. According to a video from which the Clarion Project translated, the other sister said, I heard one of them speaking in a dialect from the Gulf region, and the other one was speaking in a language I have never heard before. I kept resisting, and he hit me on my head. I woke up and saw that my entire body was covered in blood. While there are no statistics on the number of women who have been attacked, raped and murdered by ISIS since the Islamists entered Mosul, there are reports of those who fled to avoid such attacks. The report cited Lara, who escaped with 4 daughters, ages 14 to 23. They told a Russian news agency the militants had kidnapped many women in Mosul. http://www.defensian.com/ A top United States general in charge of protecting the southern border says he's been unable to combat the steady flow of illegal drugs, weapons and people from Central America, and is looking to Congress for urgent help. Author Molly O'Toole is the politics reporter for Defense One. O'Toole previously worked as a news editor at the Huffington Post. She has covered national and international politics for Reuters, The Nation, The Associated Press and Newsweek International, among others, from Washington, New York, Mexico. Full bio. Marine Corps General John Kelly, commander of the United States Southern Command, has asked Congress this year for more money, drones and ships for his mission, a request unlikely to be met. Since October, an influx of nearly 100,000 migrants has made the dangerous journey north from Latin America to the United States border. Most are children, and 3/4 of the unaccompanied minors have traveled thousands of miles from El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras. In comparison to other global threats, the near collapse of societies in the hemisphere with the associated drug and undocumented immigrant flow are frequently viewed to be of low importance, Kelly told Defense One. Many argue these threats are not existential and do not challenge our national security. I disagree. In spring hearings before the Senate and House Armed Services Committees, Kelly said that budget cuts are severely degrading the military's ability to defend southern approaches to the U.S. border. Last year, he said, his task force was unable to act on nearly 75% of illicit trafficking events. I simply sit and watch it go by, he said. But the potential threats are even greater. Kelly warned that neglect has created vulnerabilities that can be exploited by terrorist groups, describing a crime-terror convergence already seen in Lebanese Hezbollah's involvement in the region. All this corruption and violence is directly or indirectly due to the insatiable United States demand for drugs, particularly cocaine, heroin and now methamphetamines, Kelly told Defense One, all of which are produced in Latin America and smuggled into the United States along an incredibly efficient network along which anything, hundreds of tons of drugs, people, terrorists, potentially weapons of mass destruction or children, can travel, so long as they can pay the fare. With the Obama administration calling the flow of children in the United States a humanitarian crisis, even some of the most outspoken proponents of immigration reform in Congress are calling for a greater focus on security. At the same time, They demand a long-term strategy from the State Department and the United States Agency for International Development, which manages foreign aid and assistance. While the deployment of the United States military assets and personnel rightfully prioritizes national security challenges in the Middle East and Central Asia, the United States Southern Command, SOUTHCOM, is only sourced at 5% of the capacity it needs. Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chair Senator Bob Menendez, D-N.J, and other leading Reform Democrats said in a statement last month, introducing a 20-point plan to address the crisis. This is a humanitarian and refugee crisis. It's being caused in large measure by thousands in Central America who believe it is better to run for their lives and risk dying than stay and die for sure, Menendez said. The bottom line is that we must attack this problem from a foreign policy perspective, a humanitarian perspective, a criminal perspective, immigration perspective, and a national security perspective. The Democratic coalition wants increased funding and resources for SOUTHCOM and the State Department's Central American Regional Security Initiative. For fiscal 2015, the Obama administration requested $130 million for the program, which covers 7 countries, but that ask is a decrease of $30 million from the current year, the senators noted. Homeland Security Secretary Jed Johnson has said an additional $161.5 million will be provided for CARSI programs to respond to the region's most pressing security and governance challenges, but the administration has made no mention of additional resources for the United States military. President Obama's request for foreign assistance to Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras and El Salvador totals more than $280 million in fiscal 2015. After Vice President Joe Biden met in Guatemala last month with leaders from that country, Mexico, El Salvador and Honduras to address the wave of children crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, he announced $9.6 million in new assistance to Central American governments for repatriation of their citizens, improving security and preventing crime, as well as a series of USAID programs. Under USAID, $40 million will go to Guatemala and $25 million to El Salvador. Under CARSI, an additional $18.5 million will go to Honduras. Last fiscal year, the United States Customs and Border Patrol apprehended more than 26,000 unaccompanied children at the southern border, according to the United States Customs and Border Protection. But so far this fiscal year, from last October to mid-June, that number has doubled to more than 52,000, an increase of 99%. Some 50,000 unaccompanied minors have been referred to the Department of Health and Human Services, spokesman Kenneth Wolf told Defense One. Federal officials say the number of unaccompanied minors caught crossing the border this year could reach some 90,000. In response, Johnson has sent hundreds of additional border agents to the affected areas and enlisted the Coast Guard, which is loaning aircraft to help transport some of the immigrants. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, who visited Guatemala and Mexico in April, who reaffirmed the United States commitment to the region, authorized HHS to house 3,600 children at military bases and Defense Department facilities for up to 120 days, with HHS reimbursing the Pentagon for the costs. DoD is temporarily lending space for some 1,200 minors at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, 575 minors at Ventura Naval Station in California, and another 1,200 minors at Lackland Air Base in Texas. The facilities are reaching the limits of the agreement, but Pentagon spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Tom Crossan said Wednesday that additional sites are being considered. HHS officials are inspecting facilities at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington. Meanwhile, Obama's national security team continues to try and draw attention to Central American countries thousands of miles away from the U.S.-Mexico border. Secretary of State John Kerry on Tuesday traveled to Panama to discuss long-term solutions with the leaders of El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras. Next week, Johnson heads to Guatemala. On Monday, Obama took executive action, saying he will use expanded powers to address the situation. In a letter to Congress, he said he would be requesting emergency appropriations to support an aggressive deterrence strategy and a sustained border security surge. Obama is expected to request roughly $2 billion for additional border security personnel, immigration judges, detention and processing resources, and assisting Central American partners with repatriation, with formal details to come once Congress returns from recess. We now have an actual humanitarian crisis on the border that only underscores the need to drop the politics and fix our immigration system once and for all, Obama said Monday. But General Kelly says the poverty and violence prompting the migration have created a real threat to the United States' national security. Honduras, El Salvador and Guatemala have the first, fourth and fifth highest homicide rates in the world and have left near-broken societies in their wake, he said. Although there are a number of other countries I work with in Latin America and the Caribbean that are going in the same direction, the so-called Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador and Honduras, is far and away the worst off. In Congress, the unaccompanied children crisis has revived the heated political debate, with immigration reform advocates and opponents claiming an "I told you so" moment. Many Republicans, who have effectively blocked reform efforts, blame Obama, saying his amnesty immigration policies have incentivized the mass migration from Central America. In a letter dated June 20, House Speaker John Boehner, R. Ohio, called on the president to send the National Guard to the border. On Monday, freshman Representative Randy Weber, R. Texas, introduced legislation to stop all aid to Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala and El Salvador. Immigration reform advocates have pushed back, instead citing the humanitarian crisis as proof that the United States immigration system is in dire need of fixing. The recent arrivals would not qualify under Obama's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, nor the comprehensive immigration reform legislation that passed the Senate a year ago, and, advocates note, Central American migrants don't track the United States politics to that detail. Yet many in the region are familiar with the United States immigration system through the experiences of family members or neighbors. Unaccompanied minors from Central America who are apprehended in the United States by immigration officials can't be immediately deported, unlike those from Mexico. Due to the already existing backlog in immigration courts, deportation proceedings can take years, during which they will often remain in the United States with a family member or guardian, leading immigration court notices to be referred to as permisos, a pass to stay. And coyotes, people who traffic drugs and humans along well-established routes through Central America to the United States, are profiting off of the apt perception. The administration has sought to counter the influx with strong warnings for parents about the dangers to children, and stating clearly that unaccompanied minors will be sent back. But that campaign has prompted further outcry from advocates who have long claimed Obama's policy helps demonize migrants by focusing too much on enforcement. The security and humanitarian concerns are bipartisan. Texas Reps. John Cornyn, a Republican, and Henry Cuellar, a Democrat who represents the Rio Grande Valley area processing most of the immigrants, wrote the administration last month, asking, has the surge in illegal border crossers and the number of unaccompanied, undocumented immigrant children apprehended by DHS diverted critical resources away from your department's border security and national security objectives? Border hawks who call for enforcement-first immigration policy have criticized the response as insufficient. But the Obama administration has conducted more deportations in 6 years than the President George W. Bush administration did in 8, and has effectively transformed the U.S.-Mexico border. After 9/11, Bush pushed immigration agents to take on more of a national security role, eventually folding them into the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. Obama has ramped up these efforts. Spending on federal immigration enforcement spiked by 300% between fiscal 2002 and 2013, according to the Migration Policy Institute, and has now reached roughly $17 billion per year. CBP has even conducted over 700 missions as part of the top species will no longer be humans, and that could be a problem. Read more, http://www.businessinsider.com/l. Today there's no legislation regarding how much intelligence a machine can have, how interconnected it can be. If that continues, look at the exponential trend. We will reach the singularity in the time frame most experts predict. From that point on, you're going to see that the top species will no longer be humans, but machines. These are the words of Louis Del Monte, physicist, entrepreneur, and author of The Artificial Intelligence Revolution. Del Monte spoke to us over the phone about his thoughts surrounding artificial intelligence and the singularity, and indeterminate point in the future when machine intelligence will outmatch not only your own intelligence, but the world's combined human intelligence too. The average estimate for when this will happen is 2040, though Del Monte says it might be as late as 2035. Either way, it's a time frame of within 3 decades. It won't be the Terminator scenario, not a war, said Del Monte. In the early part of the post-singularity world, one scenario is that the machines will seek to turn humans into cyborgs. This is nearly happening now, replacing faulty limbs with artificial parts. We'll see the machines as a useful tool. Productivity in business based on automation will be increased dramatically in various countries. In China it doubled, just based on GDP per employee due to use of machines. By the end of this century, he continued, most of the human race will have become cyborgs, part human, part tech or machine. The allure will be immortality. Machines will make breakthroughs in medical technology. Most of the human race will have more leisure time, and we'll think we've never had it better. The concern I'm raising is that the machines will view us as an unpredictable and dangerous species. Del Monte believes machines will become self-conscious and have the capabilities to protect themselves. They might view us the same way we view harmful insects. Humans are a species that is unstable, creates wars, has weapons to wipe out the world twice over, and makes computer viruses. Hardly an appealing roommate. He wrote the book as a warning. Artificial intelligence is becoming more and more capable, and we're adopting it as quickly as it appears. A pacemaker operation is quite routine, he said, but it uses sensors in eye to regulate your heart. A 2009 experiment showed that robots can develop the ability to lie to each other. Run at the Laboratory of Intelligent Systems in the École Polytechnique Fédérale of Lausanne, Switzerland. The experiment had robots designed to cooperate in finding beneficial resources like energy and avoiding the hazardous ones. Shockingly, the robots learned to lie to each other in an attempt to hoard the beneficial resources for themselves. The implication is that they are also learning self-preservation, Del Monte told us. Whether or not they're conscious is a moot point.